Hey everybody, I'm Bede, aka the Terrible Australian of Super Podcast, and welcome to the third episode of the Godzilla Diaries. Uh, I should say before I do this episode, I did muck up something at the very end of the last episode. I mentioned that in this one I was going to talk about Mothra versus Godzilla and Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Unfortunately, accidentally skipped a film. I totally forgot there was a film between Godzilla Raids Again and Mothra versus Godzilla, and that is King Kong versus Godzilla. So I'm going to be talking about that one instead, and Mothra versus Godzilla. So Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, I'll talk about that one in the fourth episode. So sorry for disappointing everyone. Mistake on my part, but yeah. So this one I'll be chatting about the next two films in the series. Uh, King Kong versus Godzilla and Mothra versus Godzilla. Let's begin with the first one. King Kong versus Godzilla. You know, I'm still trying to figure out whether I should warn there may be spoilers for both movies. So if you don't want to know what happens, stop this video right now. But if you don't care, keep on watching. Or if you have seen the films, keep on watching as well. King Kong versus Godzilla. You know, I'm still trying to figure out whether I actually like this movie or not, because I'm not gonna lie, the first half of this movie was awful, like really, really bad. But funnily enough, as the film sort of goes along, it sort of just gets so ridiculous, so over the top, so cheesy, and so campy that I started to enjoy it. I think this film was a turning point in the series, because this is the one where I believe was the one which sort of sent the series off into sort of more sort of family friendly, kid friendly kind of direction, sort of the cheesy, campy kind of way compared to the first film, which is fine, of course, because I expect that, because I have seen Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla Final Wars, so I know what to expect in that department. But this one, though, I don't know. It like I said, it's just so cheesy and so campy that I was pretty much, for at least the first two halves or so, I was just like groaning at that and laughing over how bad it was. And then eventually, just like I said, it just gets to a point where the ridiculous factor is so on overdrive that I kind of started to embrace that. The plot basically is, well, pretty much sets it up in the title: King Kong versus Godzilla, the two mightiest monsters in all of film, finally battling each other in the one film. The King Kong in this film is definitely very different from, say, the 1930s version. He's definitely a lot bigger, that's for sure. I think he's like at least 200 feet taller than he was in that film. But I think this is Toho's own take on the character, so whatever. And the plot's interesting as well. It's just basically like these two kind of separate plots. You got this one involving Godzilla, where in the last film, in the ending of Godzilla Raids Again, he gets frozen in ice, and an American submarine happens to find that block of ice, and Godzilla pretty much frees himself, and then it goes on a rampage and starts to destroy Japan. And then there's another plot involving King Kong, where these two guys who work for this pharmaceutical company that sponsors this TV show that sort of goes into the sort of science and the mysteries and stuff like that. And their ratings are low, and they need something to boost their ratings. So they hear from this other guy about on a recent trip to an island, where he was there getting like plants and stuff like that. And they discover from him that over there, the natives on that island, there's a giant monster living there. So they decide to go over there to take photos and write about it, and eventually see if they can try to bring the monster back to Japan. So it's kind of like sort of a slight little rehash of the King Kong story that we all know and love. So just with a little bit of turns, and of course adding Godzilla into the mix. And pretty much this whole film is the build up to that. You sort of get these two different stories, and they're sort of on the collision course to each other, and then eventually we get to finally see them fight. The fights between Godzilla and King Kong are pretty hilarious, and for all the wrong reasons, and it just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. They don't really actually full on fight until probably the last 15 minutes or so of the film. Until then, they sort of have an encounter, fight a little bit, then go their separate ways. And it basically, in the film, it sort of becomes this whole media thing, like, who's gonna win? Godzilla, King Kong. It's the ultimate showdown of the century. And, yeah, it's interesting. And then, of course, when the final fight comes, it's just so ridiculous. At one point, just to show how ridiculous this film is, at one point King Kong gets his ass handed to him, and then a thunderstorm sort of starts up, and then all of a sudden the lightning strikes him a few times, and somehow that regenerizes him to wanting to fighting Godzilla. And all of a sudden, for some bizarre reason, every time King Kong fights Godzilla, he shocks him with lightning. It's so insane, this movie. Not as insane as Final Wars, but it's pretty insane. And it's weird though, because this film actually marks the return of Ishiro Honda, who directed the first Godzilla film, and this is his first film back and in the franchise, and it's such a complete. You would think. I honestly thought it was made by. If I didn't know he directed this film, I swear a different director made this film. It's just so silly, so over the top. There's a lot of bad moments, but at the same time, there are some really fun moments in a really unintentionally funny way as well. And also, I did find the aspect, because they do have the sort of the natives on the island where King Kong is on, and this isn't Skull Island. This is a completely different island in the film, and you can definitely tell these are Japanese actors who who are just, they just made them really tanned to play the natives, and all I kept thinking was about are like really, really, really tanned, and I'm just kept thinking, yeah, that's completely wrong on so many levels. You'll know what I mean if you've seen the movie or haven't, or if you want to see the film. So yeah, Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla. It's entertaining for some parts, but other parts are just not really good. Like some of the human actors were pretty awful. But other than that, I'm sort of mixed on it. But it definitely has its moments. So for this one, I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5. Now to the next one is Mothra versus Godzilla, and Hishiro Honda actually directed this one as well. So again, the tone of this one is completely different from King Kong versus Godzilla, and even the first one. I really enjoyed this one. Mothra versus Godzilla was a really fun film. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I believe the plot for this one is basically, I'm sort of looking it up now, so it's basically like these reporters and a photographer, they're sort of covering like this typhoon that happened on the coast of Japan, and there's sort of this hotel that's being built there, and they discover this giant egg out in the ocean. And we discover that egg actually belongs to Mothra. And what's interesting to me, and of course, Godzilla somehow survives his fight with King Kong at the end of the previous film and comes back alive, and then proceeds to destroy Japan once again. Seriously, I think the people of Japan need to start making like a Godzilla insurance claim or something like that for damages, but and also, but and then he sort of heads towards the hotel and towards Mothra's egg. So they basically have to go find Mothra to get it, to help humanity stop Godzilla and to save a wreck. And it's pretty. This movie is actually pretty cool. I really enjoyed it a lot. And what's interesting to me about the film is that besides, even though Mothra is in this film, it's interesting that. Sorry, I'm just looking up some information here about the film. So, but is that this actually was not Mothra's debut? Like, this is actually the second appearance of Mothra. She actually had her own film before this one. So it's interesting how, kind of looking, I just always assumed as that all these monsters were all introduced in the Godzilla series, but a lot of them actually had their own separate movies, and then eventually, sort of at certain points, made appearances in the Godzilla franchise or team ups with Godzilla and other monsters. So it's interesting. In a way, it's kind of like starting this whole universe thing, kind of similar to what Marvel's doing now with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, having these sort of separate characters and then bringing them together in this one film. And overall, I really, like I said, with the movie itself, I really enjoyed this one. I think it's a lot of fun, and to me, it's the most satisfying one of the sequels so far that I've seen. And it was actually cool to actually see a kaiju character in the form of Mothra, who is actually a good guy, good girl, I should say, a good guy, because she wants to help humanity and she's willing to save humanity from all the evils on the planet and Godzilla as well. And of course, Godzilla going around doing his thing and just, destroying everything in his path. All that stuff is pretty fun. And also the monster designs, of course, are great. Mothra is, like, Godzilla and Mothra are definitely just memorable characters in their designs, and it's just a really fun movie. Ishiro Honda actually, I think, does a much better job here at doing the sort of the monster battle stuff than he did in King Kong vs. Godzilla. So yeah, this one's just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm hoping that the sequels that I watch after this one will sort of be in that more in the same vein as this one. So I look forward to seeing what's going to happen next. And yeah, so overall, and also I think the human characters in this one did all give pretty solid performances. Like I didn't think anyone gave a bad performance at all, and the humor, like, is also quite funny as well without it feeling forced or too cheesy. So yeah, it's a really good sequel. I really enjoyed it, and I definitely can't wait to see what's going to happen next. Because, interesting spoiler for the movie, Mothra actually dies in this film, not because of a battle with Godzilla, because she's at the end of her life cycle. So the egg that she protects actually not produces one but two Mothra babies, and in the final battle, it's pretty awesome that the Mothra baby. I don't know if the Mothra babies, since they're like basically lava, like sort of caterpillar kind of creatures, they sort of go up against Godzilla and they pretty much just hand his ass over to him. They beat the crap out of Godzilla, and it's awesome. So overall, Mothra versus Godzilla definitely gets a thumbs up from me. It's a lot of fun, and I give this one a definite 3.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it that much. Alright, that's the end of this fourth episode of the Godzilla... Sorry, my bad. The third episode... Sorry, I'm terrible today. The third episode of the Godzilla Diaries. Keep a lookout for the fourth episode, in which I will be talking about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, or Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and as well as Invasion of the Astro Monster, or it's known by other titles as Godzilla vs. Godzilla, Invasion of the Astro Monster, Monster Zero, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, and the Great Monster War. So keep a lookout for those two, and I'll see you all later. See you, everyone. Bye.